Greetings folks, I'm Guy Allen, welcome to All Moto. Today we're having a bit of a chat about a bike that's turning 50 in 2025, which is my R75 Stroke 6. Now that's a 750 airhead boxer, and the Stroke 6 was the first series to start running disc brakes. This is a bike I bought relatively recently and via the son of the second owner. The second owner bought the bike in 1977 and owned it right through until 2024 when I managed to get hold of it. Somewhere along the way it had a 20-year sleep. So when it was pulled out of the shed, the son, who also happens to be a mechanic, Rowan at Moto Works near Castlemaine, Rowan managed to get it up and running again, did a brilliant job with it, recommissioned it. It runs beautifully, very smooth, does everything that it's supposed to do. Now it's got about 80,000 kilometres on it, which actually isn't a lot for an airhead. One of the reasons I ended up buying this bike was, well, firstly it was waved under my nose, and secondly I've had a very good experience with a couple of other airheads, namely a first model R75 and an R100 GS Parastacker. Both great bikes, very easy to live with, and it may sound like an oxymoron, but a reliable classic and relatively low stress. One of the things I like about this bike is that it's typical BMW for the period. So there's not a lot of horsepower, about 50 horsepower or so, but that's good enough for about 160 km/h top speed. What it's good at is that it's good at low and mid-range stuff, and it's one of those bikes you can get along quite briskly on. Like, you have no trouble holding 120, 130, pretty much all day if you wanted to. It's got relatively long travel suspension, so the ride is quite plush, sometimes a little on the floaty side. The brakes on this bike, it's running twin discs up front. Now that was something you could have done back in the day when it was new, but standard they actually came with a single disc. Now I think the second owner, who I got it from, did the conversion. By modern standards the brakes are a bit gradual, but they do the job, and for this style of bike you've got to give them a bit of extra room. Handling is pretty good. It holds its line really well in a corner through bumpy turns. There's no problems with that at all. It's not the sharpest steering out there, but it's entirely predictable. It's got that typical BMW road bike ride position of the period, so the handlebars feel quite narrow. It's got a very well padded seat, and once you get used to that kind of slightly weird feeling with the narrow handlebars, it becomes a very good thing to travel on. A friend of mine describes it as being a Zen experience, and I think I'm prepared to accept that. These days there's quite a few of them floating around. They were reasonably popular at the time, despite the fact they are something like 50% more expensive than the equivalent Honda CB750. Nevertheless, there's still good numbers of them about. They're worth looking at just from the point of view that if you want something that will be accepted at a classic run, but is also going to get you there, then this is something worth looking at. Their running points ignition, which I quite like, a little bit more maintenance with it, but very simple to tune and get right. Valve lash is by push rod, so it's screw and lock nut, very, very simple, easy to get to. There's really no tricks to looking after it. As a classic, I rate them highly. They're a good, friendly thing to get along with, so if you see a good one out there, consider it. They're worth having.